Elias opened his eyes slowly, feeling a strange stiffness all over his body. At first, he thought he was dreaming. The air smelled faintly of metal and something earthy, like wet soil after rain. He blinked, trying to adjust to the dim light. Around him was a vast chamber, high and cavernous, with walls that glowed faintly with lines of light running like rivers. Machines hummed quietly in the background, and strange panels and screens, now dusty and cracked, were scattered all around. For a long moment, he just lay there, trying to remember anything. But his mind was blank, like a book with all its pages missing. There were no memories of home, family, or even himself. The only feeling he could name was a strange curiosity. Where was he? How had he gotten here? And why did it feel like he had been asleep for a very long time? As he sat up, he noticed movement along the walls. At first it was subtle, just a flicker of darkness that didn't belong. Then he saw it more clearly, shapes of shadows that moved as if alive. They were not human, not animal, but something in between. They shifted and twisted along the walls, but they did not come close. Elias froze, unsure if he should be afraid. A soft, mechanical hum filled the room, and a voice, metallic but strangely calm, echoed from the far corner. Awakening detected. Elias's heart raced. The voice did not speak to him as a human would. It was like it existed to note what had happened. Patient active. Time elapsed. 15,000 Earth years. Elias's mind tried to grasp the numbers. 15,000 years. He shook his head. That was impossible. And yet, everything around him spoke of a time far beyond what he could imagine. The machines, the strange lights, and the long silence of the chamber all whispered that humans had lived here long ago, then vanished. Carefully he stood, testing his legs. They felt weak at first, but strength returned quickly. The shadows moved closer now, not threatening but observing. One of them lingered near a wall, stretching upward like it was reaching for something. Elias noticed that the shadows seemed to mimic the faint glow of the room, shifting in color and shape. They were intelligent. They reacted to him. Curiosity overcame fear. He took a cautious step toward the nearest shadow. The shape paused, then drifted slightly toward him, as if inviting him to follow. Elias felt a strange trust in the movement, a sense that the shadows wanted to communicate. He moved through the chamber, following the flickering forms, until he came to a series of panels covered in dust. He wiped one clean with his sleeve and saw symbols and words he somehow understood, though he had no memory of reading them before. The panels were logs left behind by humans who had lived thousands of years ago. They told stories of the past, cities that reached the sky, machines that could think, and a strange phenomenon called the shadows, guardians of knowledge and memory. Humans had created them to preserve their culture after they were gone. Elias bent closer to the panel, running his fingers over the words. They spoke of hope, of humanity's desire to last beyond time, even if the humans themselves could not survive. He felt a sudden connection, as if a spark from the past had reached him. The shadows swirled around him, flickering faster, almost like they were excited. One shadow stretched forward, forming a vaguely human silhouette. It moved in slow, deliberate gestures, and Elias realized it was trying to communicate without words. He watched, fascinated, as it mimicked the motion of pointing to a narrow tunnel leading out of the chamber. Elias hesitated. He did not know what he would find outside. The shadows seemed to sense his hesitation, twisting gently in encouragement. With careful steps, he moved toward the tunnel. The air grew warmer, fresher, and he felt a sense of life returning as he approached the opening. The tunnel led to a stairway that spiraled upward, surrounded by walls covered in moss and roots. Light filtered through cracks above, soft and golden. Elias paused at the top of the stairs and looked around. Before him lay a city that was once magnificent. Towering buildings were cracked but still standing. Nature had reclaimed the streets. Trees grew through windows, flowers bloomed on rooftops, and vines hung like curtains along the sides of skyscrapers. Birds, or creatures like them, flew through the ruins, filling the air with their songs. The shadows followed, moving lightly along the walls and ground. They did not rush or scare him. They guided him. Elias felt awe and wonder. How had the city lasted so long? How had life persisted when humans had vanished? He realized the shadows were not just guardians. They were reminders of humanity's creativity and resilience. He explored the streets slowly, touching the surfaces of walls, reading inscriptions carved into stone, and examining small artifacts left behind. A statue of a human, half covered in moss, caught his eye. He ran his hand over the cold stone, feeling a strange kinship. This city, these creations, were part of him even though he had only just awakened. As he wandered, he noticed movement again, shadows drifting across the streets and buildings. They were different from the shadows inside the chamber. These ones were lighter, more delicate, but they carried a sense of purpose. Elias watched as one shadow extended itself toward a crumbling library. He understood that it wanted him to follow. Inside, the shelves were filled with long-forgotten books, some dusty, some surprisingly well-preserved. The shadows moved among the shelves, brushing against pages as if activating the memories stored within. Elias picked up a book, and as he did, a wave of images and feelings washed over him. He saw humans of the past, their laughter, their struggles, their art, their music. He felt their dreams, their kindness, their curiosity. He understood then that the shadows were not just machines or energy. They were carriers of memory, the essence of humanity itself preserved across millennia. Time passed, though Elias did not measure it in hours or minutes. The city seemed alive, and he wandered through streets and alleys, guided by shadows that revealed fragments of the past. He saw a playground where children once laughed, a fountain that had once sparkled in sunlight, and murals depicting people and animals living together in harmony. Each sight filled him with wonder, but also with questions. Why had humanity disappeared? What had caused them to leave behind only shadows? He reached the top of a hill overlooking the city. From here he could see the entire expanse of the old metropolis. The sun, or what remained of it after thousands of years, shone gently, casting long golden rays across the streets and ruins. Shadows moved over the buildings like living streams, forming patterns that he could not yet understand. One shadow detached itself from the group and drifted closer, then paused before him. Its movements were deliberate, almost patient, as if it were waiting for him to act. Elias felt a sudden urge to speak, to ask questions. "Who are you?" he whispered. The shadow tilted, almost nodding. It did not respond with words, but Elias sensed an answer. They were neither friend nor enemy. They were guides, waiting for someone to understand them, someone to awaken humanity's spirit once more. As night fell, the city transformed. Moonlight reflected off glass windows and metallic surfaces, and shadows multiplied, stretching and twisting across the streets. Elias sat on a crumbling bench and watched as the shadows danced. He realized he was not alone. He had awakened at the right moment, not by chance, but because he was meant to witness what had been preserved. The city, the shadows, and the memories were all part of a plan to keep humanity alive, even after 15,000 years of silence. A soft, glowing panel at the edge of the street flickered to life. It showed a map of the city, marked with locations he had not yet visited. The shadows pointed toward a distant structure, taller than all the rest. Elias felt a pull in his heart, a calling he could not ignore. He understood that this was only the beginning. There was a purpose to his awakening, a journey he was destined to undertake, guided by the shadows and the memories they carried. He stood and took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. The city felt alive under the stars, and he felt a surge of hope. Humanity had vanished, but its spirit had endured in these guardians. Elias realized that he was part of something greater, something older and wiser than himself. He was not just exploring a city. He was stepping into the legacy of all who had lived before him. The shadows gathered around him, forming shapes that flickered like candlelight in the wind. One shadow, more distinct than the others, moved forward and extended a form that resembled a hand. Elias understood that it wanted him to follow, to continue the journey into the heart of this preserved world. He nodded and began to walk toward the distant structure, shadows gliding silently beside him. As he approached, a sense of anticipation grew in his chest. He did not know what awaited him inside, but he felt ready. The shadows were not threats. They were guides, companions, and perhaps friends. He realized that the journey ahead would reveal secrets of the past and the lessons of humanity. And in that moment, under the quiet light of a long-forgotten city, Elias understood that awakening was only the first step. The shadows moved ahead, beckoning him forward, and Elias followed. With each step, he felt the weight of 15,000 years lift from his shoulders, replaced by a growing excitement and wonder. The city, the shadows, and the memories of humanity were waiting. And he was ready to discover them all. Elias followed the shadows as they moved silently through the city streets. Their forms shifted and flickered in the soft moonlight, guiding him without a word. Every corner he turned revealed more of the city's forgotten beauty. Buildings that once touched the sky now wore blankets of ivy, their glass windows shattered but shimmering with reflected stars. Nature had crept in everywhere, claiming the streets, the squares, and even the tallest towers. Birds and small creatures moved freely among the ruins, singing songs that Elias felt were echoes of a past long gone. The shadows led him to a massive structure that towered above everything else. It was shaped like a dome and seemed untouched by time. Its surface reflected the moonlight in gentle waves, as if it were alive. Elias approached it with careful steps, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The shadows gathered around the base of the building, forming a semicircle that seemed to welcome him. Elias paused, taking in the sight, and realized that this place was different from the rest of the city. It radiated a sense of purpose, a feeling that it held secrets waiting to be discovered. Inside, the dome was even more astonishing. The walls were smooth and metallic, lined with glowing symbols that pulsed softly. The air hummed with energy, and faint lights moved along the walls like living threads. At the center of the dome was a circular platform, raised slightly above the floor, with an intricate pattern engraved into its surface. Elias stepped onto the platform, and immediately the lights on the walls brightened. The shadows swirled around him, their shapes forming arcs of movement that seemed almost like a dance. Elias felt a sudden connection, as if the building itself recognized him. He realized that the shadows were not just guiding him, they were awakening the place. The symbols on the walls began to shift and rearrange, forming images that floated in the air. He saw visions of humans from ages past, people creating, building, and exploring. There were scientists, artists, children, and inventors. Their lives played out before him in brief flashes, like memories projected into the room. Elias understood that the dome was a repository, a living archive of human history and achievement. The shadows moved closer, circling around him and pointing toward a large, rectangular console on one side of the platform. Elias approached it and touched the surface. The console responded instantly, glowing brighter under his fingers. Words appeared, written in a language he somehow understood, though he had never studied it. They spoke of a purpose, the preservation of human knowledge, creativity, and culture. Elias realized that the shadows were caretakers, keeping this memory alive until someone arrived who could understand it. As he explored the console, images and sounds filled the dome. He saw cities full of people working together, creating art and sharing knowledge. He watched humans inventing machines to explore the stars and creating gardens that stretched across the continents. The shadows guided him through these memories, pausing at moments that seemed important. Elias felt an overwhelming sense of connection to the past. These were not just stories, they were a legacy, a record of what humanity had been and what it could be again. Hours passed, though time felt strange in this place. Elias moved from one memory to another, learning without effort, absorbing the experiences of thousands of generations. He saw the struggles humans faced, their mistakes, and their triumphs. The shadows never left his side, their movements gentle and reassuring. He began to understand that they were more than guides. They were extensions of human consciousness, reflections of the creativity and intelligence that had once filled the world. A soft vibration ran through the platform beneath his feet, drawing his attention to a new area of the console. The symbols shifted to reveal a map of the surrounding land. It showed forests, rivers, and mountains, as well as smaller cities that had not yet been explored. The shadows indicated that these areas also held archives, places where human knowledge and memory had been preserved. Elias realized that his journey was far from over. The dome was just the beginning, a central hub connecting him to the rest of the world. He left the platform and walked toward a corridor leading deeper into the dome. The walls were lined with chambers, each filled with objects from the past. There were musical instruments, sculptures, books, and tools. As he examined them, the shadows moved among the items, causing faint glows and vibrations that seemed to bring the objects to life. Elias picked up a small wooden sculpture of a bird and felt a rush of emotion. He could sense the hands that had carved it, the care and love poured into its creation. It was as if the memories of the people who made these things were stored not just in the dome, but in the objects themselves. One shadow moved toward a tall, narrow doorway at the far end of the corridor. Elias followed, and they entered a room filled with holographic displays. The projections showed the evolution of human ideas, from simple tools to complex machines, from paintings on cave walls to holographic art, from early exploration to interstellar travel. The shadows guided him to one display in particular, showing a starship traveling through space. Elias could see the crew inside, their faces filled with hope and determination. He realized that humanity had reached for the stars long before he awoke, and the shadows had preserved their courage and dreams. Elias felt a growing sense of responsibility. He had awakened for a reason, and the shadows were leading him to understand it. He spent hours exploring the displays, learning about the humans who had come before him. He felt inspired by their creativity, their resilience, and their kindness. The memories showed him that humanity's greatest strength was not in power or technology, but in the ability to imagine, to create, and to care for one another. As he continued, he discovered a chamber filled with small, glowing orbs. Each orb contained a memory, a piece of human experience preserved in perfect detail. Elias reached out and touched one, and instantly he was immersed in the memory. He saw a child learning to play a musical instrument, a scientist making a discovery, an artist painting a mural. The shadows moved around him, helping him understand each memory and its significance. He realized that these experiences were meant to teach him, to show him what humanity valued most. Elias spent what felt like days exploring the dome and its chambers. The shadows never left him, always guiding, always protecting. He began to understand that he was not just a visitor, he was becoming part of the legacy itself. The memories he experienced, the lessons he learned, were forming a connection between the past and the future. He felt a deep sense of purpose, a calling to carry humanity's spirit forward. One memory in particular caught his attention. It showed humans working together to solve a problem that threatened their survival. They were not using weapons or force. They were using creativity, communication, and cooperation. Elias understood that this was the lesson the Shadows wanted him to learn, that true strength lay in intelligence, compassion, and unity. The memory ended with the humans celebrating their success, their faces glowing with joy and pride. Elias felt a sense of hope that he had never experienced before. The Shadows led him to the final chamber of the dome. It was circular, with a high ceiling and walls covered in intricate patterns of light. At the center was a pedestal with a glowing crystal. The Shadows moved around the crystal, forming shapes that seemed to pulse with energy. Elias approached and touched it, feeling warmth and power flow through him. The crystal projected images of the world outside the dome, showing the forests, rivers, and mountains in vivid detail. He saw that life had returned to the land, and that the planet was healing even without humans. The Shadows swirled around him, and Elias realized that they were offering him a choice. He could stay here, learning from the memories, or he could leave and share what he had discovered with the world. The thought filled him with excitement and responsibility. He understood that he had awakened not just to observe, but to act. The Shadows were guiding him toward a purpose, a mission to revive humanity's spirit and ensure that its legacy would continue. Elias spent the next hours preparing for his journey. He studied the maps, examined the chambers, and absorbed as much knowledge as he could. The Shadows moved with him, providing guidance and encouragement. He felt a deep connection to them, as if they were an extension of himself, carrying the wisdom of thousands of generations. He understood that he was not alone. He was part of a larger story that stretched across time and space. As dawn approached, Elias stepped outside the dome once more. The city was bathed in soft morning light, and the Shadows moved around him like living threads of memory. He felt a sense of anticipation and readiness. The world was vast and full of mysteries, and he knew that the Shadows would guide him to new discoveries. He took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face, and began to walk toward the first location marked on the map. The Shadows glided beside him, their forms shifting and dancing in the light. Elias felt a growing sense of wonder and excitement. He realized that this journey was not just about exploring the world. It was about understanding the essence of humanity, learning from the past, and carrying its spirit into the future. Each step brought new lessons, new memories, and new connections. He felt alive in a way he had never known, filled with purpose and curiosity. As he moved forward, Elias noticed that the Shadows began to change. Their forms became more distinct, more expressive. Some formed shapes that resembled animals. Others formed patterns that seemed to tell stories. He understood that they were communicating, sharing knowledge in ways that words could not capture. Elias listened, observed, and learned, feeling a deep bond with these guardians of memory. By the time he reached the edge of the city, Elias felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The Shadows pointed toward a distant forest, where the first of many hidden archives awaited. He stepped into the path, feeling the soft grass beneath his feet, and walked with determination. The journey had just begun, but he was no longer the same person who had awakened in the chamber. He was a messenger, a learner, and a guardian of humanity's legacy. The Shadows followed, their movements graceful and purposeful. Elias knew that together they would uncover the secrets of the past, restore knowledge, and inspire hope for the future. The world was vast and full of wonder, and he was ready to explore it, guided by the shadows and the memories of those who had come before. Elias walked through the forest that stretched beyond the ruined city. The shadows moved beside him, gliding effortlessly over grass, roots, and fallen branches. The forest was alive, filled with the soft sounds of birds, insects, and rustling leaves. The air smelled sweet with blooming flowers and damp earth. Light filtered through the tall trees, painting patterns on the ground. For the first time since awakening, Elias felt completely calm, yet filled with anticipation. The shadows seemed to sense his emotions, shifting around him like ribbons of understanding. Ahead, the trees began to thin, revealing a valley. In the center stood a structure unlike any he had seen. Its surface shimmered faintly, reflecting the sunlight in rainbow hues. It was circular and immense, with walls that seemed to flow and move as if the building itself were breathing. Elias felt a pull in his chest, a silent urging to approach. He understood that this place was important, more important than anything he had seen before. The shadows floated forward, forming a path for him to follow, and Elias stepped cautiously toward the entrance. Inside, the structure was even more extraordinary. The walls were lined with a web of light, forming patterns that pulsed gently. The floor was smooth and mirrored, reflecting Elias and the shadows moving around him. The air hummed with energy, a soft vibration that seemed to resonate with his very being. At the center of the room was a raised platform, with a crystalline core glowing softly. The shadows circled the platform, pointing toward the core, indicating that this was the heart of the place. Elias stepped closer, feeling warmth radiate from the crystal. As he touched it, images filled his mind. He saw humans from long ago working together in cities, creating art, solving problems, and exploring the stars. Unlike the previous memories he had encountered, these were not just moments frozen in time. They were connected, forming a network of knowledge, creativity, and spirit. Elias realized that this structure was called the Heart of Memory. It was the central hub where humanity's essence had been preserved, a place that connected the world and its legacy. The shadows moved closer, their shapes more defined than ever. Some seemed to form the shapes of people, others animals, and still others abstract patterns. Elias felt that they were trying to communicate, showing him how the Heart of Memory worked. It was not a place of power in the usual sense. It was a place of understanding, of connecting, of learning from the past to shape the future. The shadows were guides, waiting for someone who could comprehend the knowledge they carried. Elias walked around the platform, observing the patterns of light. He noticed that the crystal responded to his presence, brightening whenever he approached a specific section. He realized that the Heart of Memory required interaction, that it needed a conscious mind to activate its full potential. The shadows seemed to encourage him, their movements deliberate, guiding him to areas where his attention was most needed. Elias felt a thrill of discovery. He was not just exploring history, he was connecting with it, becoming part of it. He began to focus on the images projected by the crystal. He saw humans creating machines to explore space, plants grown in floating gardens, cities designed to blend with nature, and systems that encouraged cooperation and creativity. The shadows moved among the projections, highlighting patterns and relationships that were easy to miss. Elias realized that the people who created this system had not just preserved objects or words, they had preserved ideas, values, and principles that made humanity remarkable. Hours passed, though Elias did not notice. He was absorbed in the intricate web of knowledge surrounding him. The shadows moved seamlessly, responding to his questions before he even asked them. When he touched a projection, it expanded, showing details of human innovation, art, and compassion. He saw how humans solved problems together, how they celebrated each other's achievements, and how they nurtured growth in themselves and others. Elias understood that the heart of memory was not just a library, it was a living reflection of humanity's best qualities. As he continued exploring, he noticed a new section of the room. It was darker, quieter, and the light from the crystal seemed to pulse more slowly. The shadows pointed him toward it, their forms urging him forward. Elias stepped into the section and saw holographic figures of humans working on a massive project. They were designing something enormous, a network that would link knowledge and memory across the entire planet. Elias realized that this project was never completed. Humanity had disappeared before it could fully activate the system, leaving the shadows as guardians until someone capable arrived. The shadows guided Elias to a control panel embedded in the floor. Symbols glowed on its surface, and as he touched them, a wave of energy spread through the room. He felt as though he were touching not just a machine, but the collective spirit of humanity. The projections grew brighter, showing the Earth as it might be if knowledge and creativity were fully restored. Elias saw flourishing forests, thriving wildlife, and cities that harmonized with nature. He felt a surge of hope and responsibility. This was his mission, to complete what humanity had begun. Elias spent hours learning how to interact with the heart of memory. The shadows taught him to focus, to understand connections, and to follow patterns. He realized that the network required more than knowledge. It required care, creativity, and wisdom. The shadows themselves were extensions of human consciousness, and they responded to his intentions and decisions. Each choice he made shaped the projections and illuminated new possibilities for the world. A particular memory caught his attention. It showed humans cooperating to solve a critical challenge, not through conflict, but through ingenuity and compassion. They shared ideas, listened to each other, and built solutions that benefited everyone. Elias felt a deep connection to this memory. He understood that this was the essence of humanity that the shadows wanted him to carry forward. True strength was not in power, but in creativity, understanding, and cooperation. The shadows moved closer, forming a circle around the platform. They shifted and swirled, creating patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. Elias realized that they were preparing him for the final step, to activate the network that could revive knowledge and culture across the planet. He took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the crystal and the presence of the shadows. He understood that this was not just a task, it was a responsibility, a calling that would shape the future. Elias placed his hands on the crystal and closed his eyes. A surge of images, feelings, and knowledge flowed into him. He felt the lives of thousands of humans passing through his mind, their dreams, their struggles, their creativity, and their joy. The shadows moved in harmony with the crystal, amplifying the connection. Elias understood that he was becoming the link between the past and the future, the bridge that could carry humanity's spirit forward. The platform glowed brighter, and the projections expanded, filling the entire chamber with light. Elias saw the Earth as it once was, and as it could be again. He realized that the heart of memory was not just a repository, it was a seed. With his guidance, the network could restore knowledge, inspire creativity, and nurture growth across the planet. The shadows circled him, their forms shimmering with energy, showing him the path forward. Elias took a step back and observed the network. The connections between memories, ideas, and values were vast and intricate. He understood that the task ahead would require patience, understanding, and care. The shadows guided him to focus on the most important connections first, those that would allow life, knowledge, and creativity to flourish once again. He felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything he had known since awakening. Hours turned into days, though time felt different inside the heart of memory. Elias learned to navigate the network, to understand patterns and to activate different sections. The shadows were always near, their movements gentle and reassuring. They seemed to communicate without words, sharing insights, warnings, and encouragement. Elias realized that they were not just tools, they were companions, friends, and guides, reflecting humanity's wisdom and spirit. At one point, Elias encountered a section of the network that seemed dormant, almost lifeless. The shadows indicated that it had been abandoned by humans long ago, left incomplete. Elias focused on the area, bringing his understanding and care to it. Slowly, the section began to glow, and memories emerged. He saw humans exploring, creating, and imagining their potential preserved despite the passage of thousands of years. The shadows swirled around him, celebrating the revival of this forgotten part of humanity. Elias felt a growing sense of accomplishment, but also a realization that the work was far from over. The heart of memory was vast, and its full activation required more than knowledge. It required guidance, understanding, and a human presence capable of learning and nurturing the network. He understood that he was that human. The shadows had waited for someone like him, someone curious, compassionate, and capable of carrying humanity's legacy forward. As night fell, Elias stood on the central platform, the crystal glowing brightly beneath his hands. The chamber was filled with projections of the earth, memories of humans, and the shifting forms of the shadows. He felt a deep sense of connection to everything around him, the past, the present, and the potential future. He realized that awakening after 15,000 years had not been an accident. He had been chosen to continue what humanity had begun, to ensure that knowledge, creativity, and spirit would endure. The shadows gathered around him, forming shapes that glimmered like light itself. Elias felt their presence, their guidance, and their encouragement. He understood that the next step was clear. He must activate the network fully, linking all memories, ideas, and values across the planet. The heart of memory was alive, and he was its key. Taking a deep breath, Elias placed both hands on the crystal and focused. The chamber filled with light, warmth, and energy. The shadows moved in harmony, guiding him, amplifying his connection. Elias felt a surge of understanding, a flood of memories, and the presence of countless humans who had lived long ago. He knew that the world outside awaited revival, that the legacy of humanity was ready to be shared once more. And in that moment, Elias understood that he was no longer alone. He was part of a living, breathing network of memory, creativity, and spirit. The shadows were his companions, guides, and friends. The heart of memory was a seed ready to bloom, and he was the caretaker. The journey ahead would be long, but he was prepared. With the shadows by his side, he would restore humanity's legacy and ensure that its spirit would shine across the world once more. Elias felt the warmth of the crystal beneath his hands as the heart of memory pulsed around him. Light spread across the chamber, flowing into every corner, reaching the walls and the ceiling, reflecting the memories stored within. The shadows moved in synchronized arcs, surrounding him like living ribbons of energy. For the first time, Elias felt the full weight of his awakening. He understood that the moment had come to complete what humans had begun so long ago. The world outside, quiet and reclaimed by nature, was ready to hear the song of humanity once more. He lifted his hands, and the crystal responded, projecting intricate patterns of light that stretched beyond the chamber, down into the valley, across the forests, and toward the ruined cities. Elias could see the earth as it was and as it could be. The heart of memory was alive, connecting knowledge, creativity, and spirit across the planet. The shadows swirled, guiding the projections, highlighting the paths where learning, memory, and growth would spread first. Elias felt a mixture of awe and responsibility. He was the link between past and future, the bridge that could awaken the Earth to the legacy of humanity. The projections shifted to show plants, animals, and the small communities of life that had returned to the Earth. Elias saw forests thickening, rivers running clear, and creatures thriving in habitats once lost. The shadows extended their forms toward these areas, almost touching the land with streams of light. As the energy from the heart of memory reached the Earth, Elias could sense subtle changes. Trees glowed faintly, flowers turned toward the light, and the air carried a feeling of renewal. The planet itself seemed to respond to the presence of humanity's preserved spirit. He turned his attention back to the cities, the places where humans had once lived and created. Buildings that had stood empty for millennia now shimmered faintly, as if absorbing the energy flowing from the heart of memory. Small holographic images appeared in the streets, people creating, learning, and exploring. Elias realized that the network was awakening more than knowledge. It was awakening inspiration. The shadows guided him to focus on these projections, and he watched as humanity's creativity returned to the world, piece by piece. As Elias continued to interact with the heart of memory, he noticed patterns forming in the energy around him. The shadows moved in harmony, creating pathways of light that connected forests, rivers, cities, and mountains. Each path represented a connection between knowledge, creativity, and life. Elias understood that these connections were essential to restoring balance to the planet. He felt a sense of joy and excitement, knowing that he was helping to guide the revival of not only human knowledge, but also the natural world itself. Hours passed, though they felt like moments. Elias explored the projections, touching the paths of light and activating memories that had long lain dormant. He saw humans learning from nature, building tools that worked in harmony with the environment, and creating art that celebrated life. The shadows flowed alongside him, their movements gentle and precise, emphasizing the most important lessons. Elias felt a growing sense of connection, not just to the past, but to the future he was helping to shape. In one projection, he saw humans gathering in a great hall, sharing ideas and inventions. They were not competing but cooperating, each person adding their skills to a collective effort. Elias realized that this was the lesson he was meant to carry forward. Humanity's greatest strength was in unity, in creativity shared and nurtured. The shadows highlighted this memory, guiding him to expand its influence across the network. Elias focused on the light pathways, sending the message of cooperation, curiosity, and understanding to the Earth itself. The heart of memory responded with a surge of energy, and the projections became brighter and more vivid. Cities that had been silent for thousands of years now shimmered with potential, as if waiting for new life to return. Forests and rivers glowed faintly, reflecting the energy flowing through the planet. Elias felt a sense of exhilaration, knowing that the work he was doing was restoring not just memories, but the potential for a new beginning. He understood that the network could guide life itself, helping it thrive alongside human knowledge and creativity. The shadows formed shapes that resembled hands, reaching out to touch the projections and guide them further. Elias followed their movements, touching the light pathways and activating new connections. Each step he took spread energy, knowledge, and inspiration across the planet. He saw fields of flowers bloom where none had grown before, trees reach higher toward the sky, and rivers shimmer with life. The world was waking, not just from slumber, but into a new era shaped by wisdom, creativity, and care. As he worked, Elias noticed a section of the network that seemed hesitant to awaken. The shadows guided him there, showing him memories of humans who had struggled, who had doubted, who had faced challenges without easy solutions. Elias understood that these memories were just as important as the triumphs. They taught resilience, patience, and compassion. He focused his energy on these areas, helping them find balance and connection within the network. Slowly, the hesitant projections began to glow, joining the larger web of life, learning, and creativity. Night fell over the forest outside the heart of memory, but the chamber remained alive with light and energy. Elias moved among the projections and memories, activating paths and connections. He felt a deep sense of harmony with the shadows, who guided him silently but purposefully. He realized that he was part of a living system, one that combined the knowledge of the past, the potential of the present, and the promise of the future. The shadows were not just guides. They were the embodiment of humanity's wisdom and care, preserved for this very moment. At one point, Elias paused to observe the Earth as it responded to the network. He could see patterns of growth spreading across the land. Forests expanded, rivers flowed more vibrantly, and cities shimmered with holographic projections of knowledge and creativity. The shadows moved alongside these changes, ensuring that every connection was balanced and harmonious. Elias felt a deep sense of pride and humility. He was not creating this renewal alone. He was working with the legacy of humanity and the guardians that had preserved it. The projections began to show humans again, not as memories, but as potential, as ideas waiting to take shape. Elias realized that the network was preparing the world for the next stage, the return of human influence, guided by knowledge, creativity, and understanding. The shadows encouraged him to focus, and he reached out, sending energy through the network to awaken potential in every corner of the Earth. He saw new cities forming in harmony with nature, schools and libraries appearing as glowing patterns, and communities connected through ideas and cooperation. Elias felt a surge of energy and understanding. He realized that he was no longer just a human waking from slumber. He was the first ambassador of a renewed Earth, capable of guiding life, knowledge, and creativity in balance. The shadows moved around him, forming intricate patterns of light that reflected the connections he was creating. Elias understood that this moment was the culmination of 15,000 years of waiting, of preparation, and of hope. Humanity's legacy was finally ready to bloom. As dawn approached, the Earth outside the heart of memory was transformed. Forests glowed softly in the morning light, rivers sparkled with clarity, and cities shimmered with knowledge and inspiration. The shadows floated over the land, guiding the flow of energy, ensuring that every connection was harmonious. Elias stepped outside, feeling the grass beneath his feet and the warmth of the sun on his face. The world was alive, not just with nature, but with the essence of humanity's spirit. Elias walked through the revitalized landscape, observing the changes. Small creatures moved freely among the forests, flowers bloomed in vibrant colors, and the rivers carried light along their paths. The shadows followed him, guiding and supporting. He felt a deep sense of connection to everything around him, the Earth, the life it sustained, and the legacy of humans who had come before. He understood that this renewal was not just about restoring the past. It was about shaping a future guided by knowledge, creativity, and compassion. In the distance, the ruins of the old city shimmered with energy. Elias approached and saw projections of humans creating, learning, and sharing ideas. The shadows guided him to focus on these areas, and he sent energy through the network, awakening potential for human creativity and growth. He realized that the cities, once silent, were now prepared to inspire new generations, carrying lessons from the past into the future. Elias spent days walking the land, interacting with the heart of memory and the shadows, guiding the energy of renewal. Each step he took spread life, knowledge, and creativity. The shadows moved seamlessly, helping him balance the network and amplify connections. Elias felt a profound sense of joy and fulfillment. He had awakened after 15,000 years, and now he was helping to restore the Earth, guided by the wisdom of humanity preserved in the shadows. One evening, as the sun set over the revitalized forests and cities, Elias stood atop a hill overlooking the land. The shadows gathered around him, forming shapes that shimmered like light itself. He felt their presence, their guidance, and their encouragement. He realized that the journey was far from over, but the Earth was ready for the next stage of growth. The legacy of humanity was alive, and the world itself was responding to the wisdom, creativity, and spirit that had been preserved. Elias smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. He had awakened to a world waiting for renewal, and he had become the link between the past and the future. The shadows moved in gentle patterns around him, reflecting the connections he had created. The heart of memory pulsed softly, as if acknowledging the work completed and the journey yet to come. Elias understood that this was only the beginning of a new era, one where humanity's legacy would thrive in harmony with the Earth. As night fell, the stars reflected in rivers, on buildings, and across forests. Elias walked among the shadows. The world was alive with energy, life, and potential. The heart of memory continued to pulse, sending waves of knowledge and inspiration across the planet. Elias realized that awakening after 15,000 years had given him not only life but purpose. He was the first human to carry the legacy forward, guided by the shadows and the wisdom of those who had come before. And in that moment, Elias understood that humanity's spirit would never fade. It had survived in memory, in shadows, and in the network of knowledge that stretched across the Earth. With care, understanding, and creativity, the world could flourish once more. Elias looked at the rising moon, the shimmering forests, and the glowing cities, knowing that the future was bright, filled with life, learning, and the enduring essence of humanity. He walked forward, shadows at his side, ready to guide the Earth into a hopeful new era, carrying the legacy of 15,000 years and ensuring that humanity's spirit would shine across the world forever.